Hello, my dear friend, and welcome to the Spiritually Engineered Podcast, where we take a deep dive into the human experience from a spiritual perspective. Come on in, and I invite you to stay. All right, my friend, we are in a new month, in July 2025. And you know what that means. So it's time for another edition of the Wayshowers Philosophy meditation series. And I invite you to join me in this meditation as I read an excerpt from the Wayshowers Philosophy. And the Wayshowers Philosophy is a monthly meditation newsletter and kind of like a blog that's provided by the Wayshowers College as an opportunity for people to work with their guidance, their inner guidance, their intuition, to discern and kind of dive deep within oneself, using the excerpt as a way of, relating and things like that, and any insights gained and stuff. So if you have the opportunity, I invite you to just focus your attention on this. I highly advise against, any multitasking and stuff like that. I think to get the most out of it, it's always good to just prepare yourself and just be in a place of, meditation to yourself, away from distractions, and just be wholly present, so that you can open yourself up to any insights or messages or inspirations that you might get from your own team of spiritual helpers. And so, the theme of July 2025, the key word is empower. Empower. So, I'll go ahead and get started and read a little bit of the excerpt. Here's the excerpt from the Wayshowers Philosophy. Release. Decide to release limitations and empower the spirit of success now. Within me is more potential than I know what to do with. In other words, I do not consciously relate to how free I really am. That is why I cleanse, work with my guidance, and stay involved in life. Gradually, I release and unfold my potential. In the course of my experiences, I may encounter blocks. If I do not move beyond them, I will carry them until I release them. If I do not release them, it is a sign I haven't discerned it for what it actually is. I am enslaved by what I think it is. Instead, I work with guidance to identify the lesson it holds for me. Once I have this, I will naturally let it go. What was once a block becomes an accelerant. To release blocks is much like an artist chipping away at a stone to reveal the art within. All right. Begin to come back from your meditation for a moment. Taking in any impressions, anything that stood out to you. Perhaps a key word or phrase. Take a moment. All right. So, looking at the theme, empower. Let's look at it from an intellectual perspective, shall we? Using my friend dictionary.com. So, empower, used in this context as a verb, used with an object, is to give power or authority to, authorize, especially by legal or official means. Another definition is to enable or permit. Let's see, and as far as now looking at it from the feeling perspective, from the experience, empower. Yeah, usually what comes to me is just what's interesting was I recently just came back from summer camp. I went on a week-long spiritual retreat here in Osceola, Iowa. That's hosted by the Wayshowers College. And this is a pretty cool time. Get to connect with people, take some classes, work with my guidance, my intuition, discern information regarding where I'm at in my own life curriculum. And one example, one experience of empower is there was a right before I left camp to get home. My friend and mentor invited me to join him and others in cold plunging. And so I ended up getting ready, and I actually have an episode that I'm going to release in the next week where I talk a little bit more about this in depth. But basically, one of my friends that were there, Liam, he's about, I believe, 10 or 11 years old, like in middle school age. And so we were all doing the cold plunge together and like taking turns, of course, in this little bin, this little tub. And I wanted to observe and see other people do it. And then Liam, who's, mind you, middle school age, uh, decided to do it and to step into this cold plunge. And because I was like super worried, but just seeing him being able to do that, given where he's at, that right there was an example for me, an experience where I felt really empowered, to permit. It's like, okay, if he can do it, then so can I. And so that's just like my little experience with that. And so as far as like a couple of things looking at the excerpt here, and what really stood out to me are a couple of things. And one of them is actually something fresh in my mind that it was shared with me that I've been trying to put together. In the part where it says, I do not consciously relate to how free I really am. In other words, our conscious mind can't fully grasp the amount of freedom that we truly have. And to give a perspective, a classic example that perfectly encompasses this. Imagine this, for the sake of the story, and to teach. Imagine that you're a swimmer, right? And you feel really good, and you can swim really well, and you can stay afloat, right? And if you and you're not afraid to go to the deep end of the pool, where it's like 10 feet, 12 feet, and you're just like, chilling, easy. It's like a walk in the park, right? Now, imagine being pulled out from the pool, and imagine that imaginary hand just pulling you out, and then it picked you up and put you smack right in the middle of the ocean, with no land near in sight. You can't even see no mainland or anything. You're just out in the middle of the vast ocean. How do you think you would feel? Because you know how to swim, you know how to stay afloat. So then, what would be different about being out there in the ocean? Well, for starters, that survival mechanism, that survival instinct, and I think how I would answer that is because there's no land. I'm like, shoot, there's no place I can go. I have to stay afloat. I have to, for like forever, it might seem. But the reality is, that's just like that's a sense of like the vastness of all that's out there. In a sense of the planet, but even the bigger picture of the entire universe, and how we're just a small, tiny speck of sand amongst like in a tiny speck of sand in a giant sandbox, if you will. And again, it's just getting that sense of that size. Really, I think that example that I shared, I think it's a good example, I think, that really speaks to that amount of freedom that we actually have. And so one of the things that's important here that I'm also getting from reading the excerpt myself, is the importance of being attuned to a bigger picture. You can call it God's plan, or like whatever you believe. I think we're talking about a lot of similar things, but I think ultimately it's like understanding that there's a bigger picture at play here, as for the collective, but then also from your own life perspective, your own story, your own path. There's a bigger picture to it all. It's not just a randomness of randomness or random of random. kind of a thing. It's it's all it's not random because you and I, we chose to be here. Going back to the amount of freedom, like that's how much freedom we have. We chose to be here in this planet. Shoot, I would even go as far as to say we chose our situation. It's not an accident that we are dealing with the situations that we have been growing up, at least. Are looking at, just take a moment to look at your first 7 years and consider for a moment, why did I choose this? Rather than, oh, this just happened to me, this type of thing. That's a smaller picture perspective to think that life just happens to you, in my opinion. But I think life happens for you. And when I started shifting myself, because part of what drew me to this program, to what drew me to the college, was I always felt like there was something more to life that what was being taught to me than what was told to me. You know, even being raised Catholic, I always felt like there was something missing that I wasn't getting. It's part of the reason why I decided to give up that identity and develop a newer relationship with God, something that's a higher perspective, a bigger picture. And through time, I've come to discover, especially when I went to my first program, my first lecture with the in program that the Wayshowers College offers, and it really clicked for me. And once it clicked, that's when I knew I was at the right place. I was just My intuitive sense knew, like, okay, there's some validity to this, and this isn't just mumbo gumbo, weird, trying to dogma type of thing, but rather things I was really working through. So why I share that's because if you actually take the time to open yourself up to the bigger picture, you might think it's perhaps just random and there's no way and it's just whatever. It is just a chaotic mess or whatever. People have their opinions, and that's fine. I mean, obviously people are going to make their opinions based on their life experiences and what they've been through. Totally valid. Who am I to say otherwise? But I'm here to just share with you from my perspective, from my life experiences, and why I think it's important to consider, because it's definitely opened me up to a lot of things. When I look at things hindsight 2020, it actually begins to make more sense of why things played out the way they did. And in that kind of practice, kind of working through that, journaling and things like that, whether it's by yourself or even just with somebody else, a mentor or a friend, just kind of working through something. It's amazing just for me. It's just like how I start to connect certain dots, even as I'm living it, even when I become aware of, okay, this is what's going on. And it's like when you can be in this place where you move by wisdom, that is to say, you know where you came from, you know where you are, and you know where you're going. Life takes on a different meaning. Then it's like starting to look at the intentionality of everything and really understanding for me how much power I truly have within myself that I've come to understand. And so if it's something that you haven't really considered, just think about it and just consider and be open to that. Or even just put that as an open-ended question and put it on the mental shelf. And in time, I trust that that clarity will come to you. If you're truly, if you're that type of individual who truly wants more out of life, because that's something that I was at that place where I wanted more out of life, and I had gotten at the time wasn't cutting it for me. Something felt something felt like it was missing, a missing puzzle piece. And so, think about that analogy. It's like I was getting a lot of puzzle pieces from my experiences. That once I started piecing them together, my picture started expanding. So to really attune to the bigger picture, why I say this, because it really takes time. You can't just rush it. It's all, the answers come in pieces. You're not going to get the whole cake in one sitting, because it'd be a lot to take in actually. Much like how our growth is progressive, it's gradual. So too is like we receive truth and understanding in bits and pieces at a time, because that's just the rate at which we grow. We don't go from A to B just like necessarily boom most of the time. Although I do admit and also can acknowledge that there people can grow at an accelerated rate, like I know I did at some point in my life. So that can happen for sure. just speaking to the usual experience, though, the common experience is where I'm trying to get at here. And so, one of the spiritual keys that I share with people is that we're here to learn and grow, and life is a school. So, a big picture that I carry myself with is that as long as I'm here, I'm always practicing as a soul having a human experience in this school. And that from washing dishes to using the bathroom to eating to going to a walk at a park or even a dialogue I've had with a friend, no matter what it is, there's always an opportunity to learn more about yourself. And it's through that process, through that commitment, that can really help, at least for me, clarify and also help me build my inner security from within because I've done the work. It makes for a secure person to be able to have that kind of practice. And it's not something that's like has to be strenuous or crazy. I take a few minutes every day to evaluate myself, and then I have meditation sessions with one of my mentors, and then and I have some online Zoom groups where we meditate together, and we just kind of, we all check in and tune in and try to expand ourselves, periodically. That's kind of part of my personal spiritual routine to keep myself spiritually clean or cleansed. Because there's so much out there, there's so much going on in the world that it's very easy to get caught up in stuff. And as a sensitive and someone who has built awareness, I've come to recognize this. And perhaps you probably recognize this too. Maybe you can recognize ways that you've taken on things that belong to your family or your loved ones or whomever or your friends. And maybe you've had realizations that it wasn't really you or it wasn't really about you when you've examined certain points in your life or certain experiences you might have had. And really just kind of shifting away from that and moving to something that's more you, more of like, okay, what's my life curriculum about? And it's really making that choice to experience your life curriculum that of course you'll share with people. It's not like it's a solo endeavor. As a matter of fact, your learning and growing process is never alone. You have the people here in physical bodies as well as people on this other side in the spiritual realm, i.e. your spirit guides. They're always there backing you every step of the way. Have you ever noticed or paid attention to the chills or sensations of chills? Maybe you can identify any moments, any pictures or any knowings or clear or an understanding or a feeling you've gotten that might have come from your team. They're always sending us messages every single day. To me, it's just a matter of just paying attention, and really to uncover, oh shoot, okay, what's this about? So when I mentioned that there's so much to be learned and gained from here, everything an opportunity to learn, one of the things that also holds true and is there for us when we look at our triggers, our challenges, or even our insecurities, stuff that we've picked up in our first 7 years, mind you. We all go through some kind of programming in our first 7 years. That's part of the game. I have. And I'm pretty sure you have too. And as I'm looking at the excerpt here in front of me, they talk about the sub key theme for this particular excerpt is release, release, release. And part of what life is about is releasing a lot of limitations, because that's something that's like really prevalent in planet Earth in the energy, in the general collective consciousness. It's a lot of limitations out there. But part of what it takes to graduate from this plane of existence, to graduate from this school, requires rising above limitations, specifically where it shows up for each and every single one of us. Where limitations may show up for me may not hold true for you in your personal life. And that is because I am unique just as much as you are unique. And there's not one soul out there out of the billions of people on this planet, and God knows how many people out there on the other side. Still, there's not one soul just like you who has gone through the experiences you have gone and who experiences things the way that you do. So of course in your life curriculum, you're going to have your own thing, your blocks and stuff like that. And with the stuff like that, it's definitely important to just be patient with the whole process, because it all happens gradually. When I look at nature in the natural world, it really does says a lot about universal truth, at least what I've come to find. And so when I look at, let's say, a plant growing, when you look at plant growth, it doesn't happen like that, like super fast and super quick, and then oh my god, it next one moment's a seed, the next moment, boom, it starts magically sprouts within seconds. That's that's not how it works. But it happens progressively. And so one of the things that has been really progressing for me, and at times it really feels like it's so slow, and I even get frustrated and impatient, is really trying to understand and discern. Like for me, one of the things that I get caught up in is worry. Like I can worry about a lot of things and even exhaust a lot of my energy on things that are like really minuscule and small. I mean, I don't like to admit it, but at least I'm saying this to own up to like what I'm going through right now. And something that I'm working on is, the part where it says in the excerpt, where it's like when I take the time to discern the limitations and the things that need to be released, it's like that's part of like the requirement is what it's saying. Like if I can just discern what it's about, whatever challenges, whatever thing you got going on, if you could begin that practice of just discerning what that's about, and that happens from working from your intuitive part, your intuitive center, you know. And also, by the way, there's also tools and techniques you can go about it if you're not sure on how the heck to even do all this. Check out the show notes below if you want more information on that, uh, if you're interested. And that's just one outlet that's helped me. Well, that's a resource that has helped me tremendously. I really should say resources, but I guess, just there's depending on where you click. But nevertheless, there's a lot of stuff that's helped me develop these tools to help me clarify that for my stuff. Because again, like if I were in your shoes, I'd probably be clueless too. Like, okay, I don't even know where to begin or where to do this, and that's totally valid. And that's why I I put my message out there and I share resources that I know it's worked for me, so that for people like you who are genuinely want to understand and know more, can have can look to guides and stuff like that as you tread your path, and I'm doing the same for myself as I'm treading along in my path. Look into those who are my guides, no matter who they are, where they're from, how old they are, stuff like that. I know I've gotten guides from across the board. People, specifically, I'm talking about people in physical bodies here. My spirit guides, of course, are another thing too. But just speaking on that aspect here in the material world. And so it's all about being here. So for me, it's just like really working through all that and discerning that, so that once I understand fully, and I've definitely experienced that when I've gotten greater insights on things that would have normally have caused me greater stress. But then with the deepened understanding, it's like, okay, now I understand where that fits into the bigger picture of my life plan, my path, my story. Just like the same could be said for you. And it's something that's totally under your control. Nobody from the outside dictates where your life gets to, what direction it goes. Only you decide. And that's universal truth. And so the sooner I get into that practice of discerning and cleansing, the cleansing is like, I mentioned cleansing is important because it's like we pick up things from our environment, emotions, ideas, concepts, beliefs, limiting belief systems from people at times. Um, and part of, I remember I had posted in this little social platform. It was uh, on this app I was using just to connect with people, and so I had asked people like, describe if you could describe life in one word, with one word, what would it be? And I remember one response that stood out to me was healing, and I wanted to bring that up because I do believe that's definitely a part of what life's all about. The outgrowing limitations, shedding old limiting beliefs that we were taught growing up because of traditions, and because there's been a lot of patterns, thought patterns and stuff that have been perpetuated throughout the ages, mind you. Imagine the lineage that has been passed down over your generation that's you know, that finally made its way to you, and thinking about, what are some things about my belief system that could be a result of my lineage or where I've come from, you know? I mean, really, as it gets even crazier, when I start building that awareness and just understanding that for myself and my situation, and sharing this for you to not just to give you to open yourself up to something perhaps you may not have considered before. So if there's anything to be gained from this, when it comes to talking about release, that sub key theme, release, you know, to release anything, to really release any ways of like how we can hold ourselves back, which is something that I've come to understand at this point in my life. Is like it's not so much my situations or the people necessarily. It's more so me holding myself back. And if I try to blame something outside of me, I know it's an excuse because of how much power, how much freedom I have. Think about that example I shared with like being in the ocean, a free agent in the middle of an ocean with anywhere to go. No bars, no limitations, just unlimited, limitlessness, right? And that's why for me I've come to understand that when it comes to freedom, that's another aspect as well too. It's just like being on this planet here to liberate ourselves from ourselves, i.e. the limitations that we were taught, the ways that we can hold ourselves back. Like I know for myself, that takes time, that takes consistency, that takes commitment. But most importantly, it has to begin with a decision. And that's the part that it says right there. Decide to release limitations and empower the spirit of success now. Decide now. Because if it's one thing I'm learning a lot, is that if I don't make a decision for myself, someone else will. If you don't make a decision for yourself, someone else will. And if you don't believe me, well, I hope that whenever experiences you're going through, you're reminded of this particular episode. And if that's the case, I hope you experience that aha moment like I know I did. So, so make that important decision now to decide, you know, if anything, decide that you're going to commit to personal growth, your own personal growth, because from that place, we can make lasting change because that's that change that can affect inside and out. And of course, as a natural byproduct, it uplifts the people around you. It can help heal the people around you when you do the inner work. That's why I think this kind of work, doing the inner work, is important. It's not just like, it's not extracurricular, it's fundamental. This is what I'm gathering, what I've understood about understanding about the living in two worlds at once and understanding the spiritual world and being affected by that simultaneously in the material world, and it's all about sharing this important stuff so that you can live with more mastery, more abundance, more joy, more fulfillment. Because isn't that all we ever want? I think that's all. That's what most of us want, right? That fulfillment, and everybody has that right to that, to thrive. So, I hope you guys think out of this. I hope to send you some love and backing and the spiritual theme and essence of this month's spiritual theme, empower, to empower you to move forward wherever you are in life, no matter what has happened, what has transpired, but to just seize the present moment and to move forward feeling empowered with a burning desire for accomplishment, fulfillment, fun, adventure, all the things I wish for you and your loved ones as well. Because we all matter. Everybody matters, and I definitely want to do my part to help people, and I appreciate those who want to help other people help themselves. And so, go forth with the energy of empower, my friend. You got this. I believe in you. But more importantly, you got to believe yourself. Because if it's not you, then who else? And even if you have people believing in you, it doesn't mean anything if you can't return that to yourself. It's got to act from it within, that inside out. And that's flourishing. And so I think I'll leave it here, my friend. Something for you to think about. So, so if you made it this far in the episode, thank you so much for your time and attention. This has been another episode of Spiritually Engineered. I'm your host, Ahmed Zapeta, signing out. And as always, take care, my dear friend.